Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily. I'm Nicholas Richardson and this is the news. Behind closed doors, the three political coalitions are having talks about forming a government following the elections. In the media, there are reported rumours of a rotation of roles, including Speaker of the Sejm, to fulfil the career aspirations of multiple politicians. Predictably, the primary candidate is Szymon Hołownia of the Third Way, trailed by a left candidate. Alexander Wojek of Telewizja Republika has more. Despite the fact that the opposition's chosen nominee for Prime Minister is Donald Tusk, the roles of Deputy Prime Minister and Speaker of the Sejm have yet to be assigned. To satisfy the aspirations of the different coalition partners, the position of second in command will be rotated. I believe this is a positive solution. I recall when the President of the European Parliament and the heads of committees changed. This sparked greater cooperation. It appears likely that Third Way leader Szymon Hołownia will serve as the same speaker for the first 2 years, while the new left Władimir Czarzasty will take over for the following 2 years. I would focus on the structure of the government because if it turned out that the ministers were to change every year, it would be worse. As you know, government stability is very important. Law and justice politicians have highlighted the fact that if a speaker is changed mid-term, it will have a negative impact on the functioning of the lower house of parliament. If a left-wing politician currently holds this position, a rotation to a politician from the People's Party would result in promoting people from their own club. This would cause major complications and potentially paralyze the state. Members of the Polish People's Party also don't believe in rotating the role of Speaker of the Sejm. I don't avoid this idea, but I also think that a Third Way representative should be Speaker of the Sejm. For the entire term? Yes, for the entire term. The opposition has said that the agreement between the political parties in power will be made available to the public. We may expect to have access to this information before the next session of the Sejm, which is scheduled for the 13th of November. The European Union needs a strong policy on cooperation between their defence industries. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said at the start of an EU summit on EU enlargement and reforms in Berlin. A specific policy on cooperation between defence industries should become one of the pillars of a common security and defence policy in the European Union, Kuleba told reporters at the conference. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock told the summit participants that she was confident that the European Union would advance Ukraine's bid to join the bloc next month at a summit seen as a key milestone in Kiev's efforts to integrate with the West. Presenting EU enlargement as a geostrategic necessity, Baerbock said that the 27-nation bloc also needed to plough ahead with tedious internal reforms to be able to function with 30-plus members. Polish Foreign Minister Zbigniew Rau disagreed with the German analysis and said ahead of the meeting that his country believed the accession process of new countries does not require any change of treaties or any institutional reforms of the type being pushed for by Germany and France.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, in the present very insecure international environment, we need a speed process of accession of the Western Balkan countries, of course, of Ukraine and Moldova. We in Poland strongly believe that the accession process does not require any change of treaties, any institutional reform of the European Union, because the legal framework that is being offering right now by the treaties is absolutely fit for the enlargement process. So, moreover, we are strongly convinced that the principle of unanimity guarantees strong support of each and every country for the EU initiatives. In terms of improvement of Georgian democracy, in terms of rule of law, Georgia is making a considerable progress here. But we have some, how should I put it, expectations concerning some political issues at home, for example, future of the former president, Mr. Saakashvili, the condition of his health, and so on and so on. So there is some room for improvement, so to speak. But certainly, I strongly believe that Georgia deserves a warm welcome to the European family.
EU leaders will decide at a summit on December the 14th and 15th whether to grant Ukraine the formal start of membership talks, which for Kyiv is a top priority on a par with Western military aid and financial support.
I will raise with my fellow colleagues the point that among many policies that the European Union is implementing, we need a new, strong, consolidated policy, EU policy on cooperation of defense industries of EU countries and candidate countries, because we see that in order to defend itself, in order to resolve conflicts and deter aggressions in Europe, efforts in the area of defense industry need to be stepped up. And this specific policy of cooperation of defense industry should become one of the pillars of the common security and defense policy of the European Union. I think that the reaction of the European Union and the way the European Union handled the Russian aggression against Ukraine since last February taught the Union a lot, and the European Union showed that it can do much more. So we have to move from maintain status quo and react to shape status quo and be proactive. And this is the added value that Ukraine can bring to the future of the European Union.
The Executive European Commission will issue a report on the 8th of November assessing progress towards EU membership by Ukraine and other hopefuls including Moldova, Georgia and Western Balkan states. If history is written by the victors, then a small group of Russian activists are doing their best to make sure the battle to remember the millions of victims of Soviet repression is not lost, one small steel plaque at a time. President Vladimir Putin has sidelined those who have done most to research the crimes of 7 decades of communism, perhaps loath to invite comparison with his own suppression of dissent or blur the patriotism needed to drive his special military operation in Ukraine. The leading chronicler, Memorial International, was banned almost 2 years ago after more than 3 decades of painstaking work. But the Last Address project has over several years managed to put up 1,200 plaques on buildings across Russia, each commemorating one victim at their last home before they were executed or exiled or left to rot in a prison colony. Each steel rectangle, 19 by 11 centimetres, has a square hole and is engraved only with the person's name and profession and their dates of arrest, internment or execution and formal rehabilitation. Every plaque has an applicant. We don't invent names and our heroes. Public initiative is the basis of the Last Address Memorial Project. People order a placing of plaques in memory of their relatives, fathers, grandfathers. Sometimes it happens that some residents of the apartment building are unhappy with such plaques, maybe unhappy because of psychological, ideological, even emotional reasons. Sometimes we hear that we turn the city into a cemetery. People who say something about cemeteries forget that our heroes don't have individual graves. At most we know that there is Butovo burial site, where thousands of shot people were buried, or Komunarka polygon, where a couple of thousand shot people are buried. All of them are buried in common graves. They don't have a personal grave. Artist Vladimir Ovchinnikov, 85, had hoped to see a museum of political repression adorned with dozens of his portraits of victims open in Borovsk, 115 kilometers southwest of Moscow, on the 29th of October, on the eve of the Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Political Repression. But local authorities cancelled the event. It was not the first time Ovchinnikov, whose grandfather was shot by Lenin's Bolsheviks in 1919 and whose father was arrested and joined Stalin's purges, had been thwarted in this way. Why do we stay silent? Why do we hide things, he said. Instead of learning lessons, we're creating a country of lessons not learned. That's the news. Thank you for watching. Stay with us for the weather, Poland Daily Business and more programmes. But from me, it's have a good night and a better tomorrow.